Sarah Martinez wiped down another table at the Sunset Diner, her movements automatic after 3 years of the same routine. The small restaurant sat just outside Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, catching the overflow of military personnel who couldn't stomach another meal at the base cafeteria. At 25, Sarah had perfected the art of invisible service, quick, efficient, and unremarkable. The lunch rush was picking up when the familiar sound of combat boots echoed across the linoleum floor. Sarah glanced up to see a group of 6 Navy SEALs settling into the large corner booth, their conversation animated and loud enough to carry across the half-empty diner. She recognized most of them as regulars, though they barely acknowledged her existence beyond placing their orders. "Looks like we got the invisible waitress again," muttered Jake Morrison, a stocky SEAL with arms covered in tattoos. His voice carried that particular brand of military arrogance that Sarah had grown accustomed to over the years. "Hey, at least she's fast," replied Tommy Chen, not bothering to lower his voice. "Remember that blonde from last month? Pretty as a picture but dumber than a brick. Took her 20 minutes to figure out we wanted coffee." Sarah approached their table with practiced professionalism, her notepad ready and her expression neutral. She had learned long ago that reacting to their comments only made things worse. These men were heroes in the eyes of the world, and she was just a waitress trying to pay her bills. "What can I get you gentlemen today?" she asked, her voice steady despite the familiar knot forming in her stomach. Well, Jake leaned back in his seat, looking her up and down with obvious amusement. "She speaks. I was starting to think you were mute, sweetheart." The others chuckled, and Sarah felt her cheeks flush slightly. She kept her pen poised over the notepad, waiting for their actual orders while they continued their performance for each other's benefit. "I'll take the usual," said Marcus Washington, the most senior among them, though his tone was kinder than the others. "Burger, medium rare, extra fries." "Same here," Tommy added, then looked directly at Sarah with a smirk. "But make sure the cook doesn't mess it up like last time. Some of us actually have important work to do this afternoon." Sarah nodded and continued taking their orders, each comment designed to remind her of her place in their world. She was the help, invisible until needed, insignificant in the grand scheme of their important military lives. When she finally walked away from their table, she could hear them resuming their conversation about upcoming training exercises and weekend plans that didn't include worrying about making rent or putting gas in an aging Honda Civic. In the kitchen, Sarah clipped their order to the wheel and took a moment to compose herself. Miguel, the cook, glanced at her with sympathy. He was one of the few people who treated her with genuine kindness. "The Navy boys giving you trouble again?" he asked in his thick accent, flipping burgers on the grill. "Nothing I can't handle," Sarah replied, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. The truth was, each interaction chipped away at her self-worth a little more. Sarah had been a promising student once, with dreams of becoming a nurse. But life had a way of derailing plans. When her father's medical bills started piling up after his stroke, college became a luxury she couldn't afford. The Sunset Diner was supposed to be temporary, just until she could save enough money to return to school. 3 years later, those dreams felt as distant as the moon. As she returned to the dining room with their drinks, Sarah caught fragments of their conversation. They were discussing a recent mission, their voices dropping to more serious tones when they thought civilians might overhear. Despite her resentment, Sarah couldn't help but be curious about their world. These men regularly put their lives on the line for their country, facing dangers she could only imagine. It was a reminder that her problems, while real to her, were relatively small in comparison. "Here you go," she said quietly, setting down their drinks without making eye contact. "Thanks, honey," Jake said with exaggerated sweetness. "You're a real peach." The sarcasm in his voice was unmistakable, but Sarah had learned to let such comments roll off her back. She was about to return to the kitchen when Tommy called out. "Hey, waitress girl. What's your name anyway? We've been coming here for months and I don't think we've ever asked." Sarah paused, surprised by the question. "Sarah," she replied simply. "Sarah," Tommy repeated, as if testing the name. "Well, Sarah, I have to ask, is this really your life's ambition? Bringing food to people who actually matter?" The comment hit harder than usual, perhaps because there was truth in it. Sarah felt her professional mask slip for just a moment, revealing a flash of hurt that she quickly covered. "I'm working my way through school," she said quietly, immediately regretting the personal information she'd shared. "Oh, college girl," Jake perked up with mock interest. "What are you studying? Advanced burger flipping? Professional coffee pouring?" The table erupted in laughter, and Sarah felt her face burn with embarrassment. She turned to leave, but Tommy's voice followed her. "Come on, don't be like that. We're just having fun. You should learn to take a joke." Sarah made it to the kitchen before the tears started. Miguel looked up from the grill and immediately set down his spatula. "Mija, what happened?" "Nothing," Sarah said, wiping her eyes quickly. "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. The constant barrage of small humiliations was wearing her down, making her question everything about her life choices. She watched through the service window as the SEALs laughed and joked, completely oblivious to the impact of their words. To them, she was entertainment, a way to kill time between their important missions and training. What they didn't know was that Sarah carried her own burdens. Her father's medical condition had worsened in recent months, requiring more expensive treatments that insurance didn't fully cover. Her younger brother was struggling in school and needed tutoring they couldn't afford. Her mother worked double shifts at a hospital laundry service, coming home exhausted and worn down by years of financial stress. Sarah's dreams of nursing school weren't just about personal ambition, they represented hope for her entire family. A career in healthcare would provide stable income and benefits, something they desperately needed. But every month, more of her paycheck went to family expenses, leaving less for the education that could change everything. The lunch rush continued, and Sarah served other tables with forced cheerfulness, but her mind kept drifting back to the SEALs' table. Their casual cruelty felt particularly sharp today, perhaps because she was already feeling vulnerable. Last night, she had received another rejection letter from a scholarship program, and the weight of her circumstances felt heavier than usual. When she finally brought their food, the SEALs had moved on to discussing their weekend plans. Jake was planning a trip to Las Vegas with money he described as pocket change, while Tommy talked about buying a new motorcycle. Their casual attitude toward money that could transform Sarah's life felt like salt in an open wound. "Enjoy your meals," Sarah said automatically as she set down their plates. "Wait a minute," Marcus said, his voice more thoughtful than the others. "Sarah, right? You mentioned school. What are you studying?" For a moment, Sarah considered lying or deflecting, but something in his tone suggested genuine interest rather than setup for another joke. "Nursing," she replied carefully. "Or at least, I hope to be." "That's noble work," Marcus nodded approvingly. "My sister's a nurse. She says it's tough but rewarding." Jake rolled his eyes. "Oh great, now we're having a career counseling session. Can we just eat our food?" But Marcus ignored him, maintaining eye contact with Sarah. "Why nursing?" The question caught Sarah off guard. When was the last time anyone had asked her about her dreams rather than just her immediate needs? "I want to help people," she said honestly. "And, my family, we could use the stability." Something shifted in Marcus's expression, a recognition of hardship that his teammates missed entirely. Before he could respond, Jake interrupted with another round of mockery. "How touching. The waitress wants to save the world. Maybe she should start by saving up enough money for school first." The cruel irony of his comment, that she was working at this very job to try to save money for school, was lost on him entirely. Sarah felt the familiar sting of tears threatening again. "Excuse me," she managed, turning away quickly. As she walked back to the kitchen, Sarah heard Marcus's voice, quieter but firm, "That was unnecessary, Jake." "Oh, come on," Jake replied. "She needs to toughen up if she wants to make it in the real world." Sarah spent the rest of their meal avoiding their table as much as possible, sending Miguel out with drink refills and the check. When they finally left, she found a modest tip on the table along with their usual scattered napkins and small mess. As she cleared their dishes, Sarah noticed something that made her pause. On the napkin under Marcus's coffee cup, someone had written, "Hang in there. Dreams take time, but they're worth it." The small gesture of kindness felt enormous in that moment, a reminder that not everyone saw her as invisible or worthless. Sarah tucked the napkin into her apron pocket, a small token of hope on an otherwise difficult day. The afternoon shift passed quietly, with Sarah serving a mix of locals and military personnel who treated her with basic human decency. As closing time approached, she found herself thinking about Marcus's question regarding nursing. When was the last time anyone had asked her about her aspirations rather than just her function as a waitress? That evening, as Sarah drove her aging Honda home to the small apartment she shared with her family, she reflected on the day's events. The SEAL's casual cruelty was nothing new, but it felt different somehow. Perhaps it was Marcus's unexpected kindness, or maybe she was just reaching her breaking point with the constant stream of small humiliations. At home, she found her mother Elena asleep on the couch, still wearing her hospital scrubs from the double shift she'd pulled. Her father Roberto was in his recliner, working on physical therapy exercises while watching television. The stroke had left him partially paralyzed on his left side, but he fought daily to regain mobility and independence. "How was work, Mija?" he asked as Sarah quietly entered the living room. "Fine, Papa," she lied, not wanting to burden him with her troubles. Her 15-year-old brother David looked up from his homework spread across the coffee table. "Did you remember to ask your boss about getting more hours?" Sarah had forgotten completely. Between the emotional toll of the day and the practical demands of her job, the conversation with her manager had slipped her mind entirely. "I'll talk to him tomorrow," she promised, though she knew the diner was already overstaffed for the slow winter season. That night, as Sarah lay in the bed she shared with her mother in their small two-bedroom apartment, she pulled out the napkin Marcus had left behind. In the dim light from the hallway, she read his words again, "Dreams take time, but they're worth it." The message felt like a lifeline in an ocean of doubt and frustration. For 3 years, Sarah had been treading water, working just hard enough to survive but never gaining ground toward her goals. The scholarship rejections, the mounting family expenses, and the daily grind of serving people who barely saw her as human had worn away her optimism bit by bit. But Marcus's words reminded her that someone had noticed her struggle, had recognized her dreams as valid and worthy of encouragement. It was such a small gesture, yet it felt monumental in its impact. Sarah made a quiet decision that night. Tomorrow, she would ask her manager about additional hours. She would also research new scholarship opportunities and maybe even visit the community college to explore financial aid options she might have missed. The nursing program wouldn't wait forever, and neither would her family's needs. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Sarah held on to that small piece of hope Marcus had given her. She didn't know that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine, or that the kindness of one Navy SEAL would set in motion events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself and her worth. The next morning would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and the beginning of a story that would transform not just her own life, but touch the lives of everyone around her. For now, though, she slept peacefully, holding on to the belief that dreams, no matter how distant, were still worth pursuing. The next morning brought an unexpected call that changed everything. Sarah had just finished her opening routine at the Sunset Diner when her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. "Sarah Martinez?" The voice was professional, crisp. "Yes, this is Sarah. This is Linda Chun from the Veterans Affairs Office at UC San Diego. We received your scholarship application from last year, and I have some interesting news." Sarah's heart began to race. She had applied to dozens of programs over the past 2 years, collecting rejection letters like unwanted souvenirs. The silence stretched as Linda continued. "We have a new scholarship program specifically for children of veterans and military families. Your father's service record qualifies you for consideration." Sarah nearly dropped the phone. Her father had served briefly in the Army before she was born, but his service had been cut short by an injury during training. She had never thought to mention it on applications, assuming 4 months of service wouldn't count for anything. I didn't know that would qualify," Sarah stammered. "The program is designed to help families like yours. However, there's a catch. We need a letter of recommendation from someone currently serving in the military, preferably an officer, who can speak to your character and work ethic. Sarah's heart sank as quickly as it had soared. She didn't know any active military personnel well enough to ask for such a favor. The SEALs who frequented the diner barely knew her name, let alone her character. "How long do I have?" Sarah asked. "The deadline is next Friday." "I know it's short notice, but this is a new program and we're trying to help people for the spring semester." After hanging up, Sarah stood in the empty diner, processing this unexpected opportunity. 7 days to find a military officer willing to vouch for her character. It seemed impossible, yet it was the closest she'd come to a real chance at nursing school in 3 years. The lunch crowd arrived as usual, and Sarah threw herself into work while her mind raced with possibilities. Maybe she could approach one of the base chaplains, or perhaps find an officer who ate at the diner regularly. The problem was, most of the military personnel who came in were lower-ranking enlisted men who wouldn't carry the weight the scholarship committee needed. Around noon, the familiar group of SEALs arrived, settling into their usual corner booth. Sarah's stomach churned as she approached their table, yesterday's humiliation still fresh in her memory. But desperation had a way of overriding pride. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," she said, notepad ready. "What can I get you today?" Jake looked up with his typical smirk. "Well, if it isn't our favorite college girl. Learn anything new since yesterday?" Sarah forced a smile, ignoring the barb. As she took their orders, she found herself studying Marcus more carefully. His uniform bore the insignia of a lieutenant commander, surely that was high enough rank for the scholarship committee. But how could she ask someone who barely knew her for such a significant favor? When she returned with their drinks, Sarah overheard them discussing an upcoming training exercise that had been postponed due to equipment issues. Marcus was clearly frustrated, explaining how the delay would affect their deployment schedule. "Excuse me," Sarah said quietly, approaching Marcus directly. "Lieutenant Commander Washington? Could I speak with you privately for just a moment? It's important." The table fell silent, all eyes on her. Jake's expression shifted from amusement to suspicion. "What's this about?" Tommy asked. "It's personal," Sarah replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "Please, sir. Just 2 minutes." Marcus studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Let's step outside." As they walked toward the front of the diner, Sarah could hear Jake's voice behind them. "This should be interesting. Maybe she's finally going to ask for a real tip." Outside, Marcus crossed his arms and waited. Up close, Sarah could see the weight he carried, not just physical, but the responsibility that came with leadership. His dark eyes were serious but not unkind. "What's on your mind, Sarah?" The words came out in a rush. Sarah explained about the scholarship, the deadline, and the requirement for a military recommendation. She told him about her father's brief service and her family's financial struggles, carefully avoiding any mention of self-pity or desperation. "I know I'm just a waitress to you and your team," she concluded. "But I work hard, I'm reliable, and I genuinely want to help people. I wouldn't ask if I had any other options." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing her request. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "You're asking me to stake my reputation on someone I barely know?" "Yes, sir. I am." "Tell me why nursing?" The question was the same one he'd asked yesterday, but this time Sarah sensed he was truly listening for the answer. "When my father had his stroke, I spent weeks in the hospital with him. I watched the nurses work, really watched them. They weren't just following doctors' orders or checking boxes. They were advocates for their patients, fighting for better care, comfort, dignity. They saw people, not just medical cases." Sarah paused, gathering her thoughts. "There was one nurse, Maria, who noticed my father wasn't eating because he was embarrassed about needing help. She didn't just feed him, she taught him exercises to improve his coordination and gave him modified utensils that helped him feel more independent. That's the kind of nurse I want to be." Marcus nodded slowly. "And working here? How does that prepare you for nursing?" Every day I serve people who see right through me, Sarah said honestly. I've learned patience, how to stay calm under pressure, and how to treat people with dignity even when they don't return the favor. I think those are important qualities for a nurse. There was an edge to her voice that Marcus caught immediately. He glanced back toward the diner, where his teammates were visible through the window. My guys give you a hard time. It wasn't a question. Sarah considered lying, but something about Marcus's directness encouraged honesty. Sometimes. But that's not why I'm asking for your help. I'm asking because you're the only officer I know, and this scholarship is my only shot at school this year. Marcus was quiet again, and Sarah could almost see him weighing her words against his knowledge of her. 3 years of professional service, always polite despite provocation, never missing work even when she was clearly exhausted. I'll need to see your application materials, he said finally. Transcripts, essay, the whole package. If I'm going to recommend you, I need to understand exactly what I'm recommending you for. Sarah's heart leaped. Does that mean you'll consider it? It means I'll review your file and make a decision by Thursday. That gives you time to get the letter if I approve, and find someone else if I don't. Thank you, Sarah breathed. Really, thank you for even considering it. Don't thank me yet. My recommendation means something because I don't give them lightly. If your application doesn't meet my standards, I'll tell you honestly. When they returned to the table, Jake immediately pounced. So what was that about? Secret military intelligence? Personal business, Marcus replied curtly, settling back into his seat. Come on, Marcus. The waitress pulls you aside for a private conversation and we're supposed to pretend that's normal? Sarah felt her face flush, but Marcus's voice cut through any further speculation. Drop it, Jake. The authority in his tone ended the conversation immediately. Sarah finished serving their lunch in relative peace, though she could feel the curious stares from the other team members. That evening, Sarah spread her application materials across the coffee table in her family's small living room. Her father watched from his recliner as she organized transcripts, essays, and recommendation forms. What's all this, Mija? Sarah explained about the scholarship opportunity and Marcus's conditional agreement to review her application. Her father's face lit up with pride and hope. Your grades from community college, they are very good, he noted, looking at her transcripts. You always were the smart one in the family. I just worked hard, Papa. Hard work and smart thinking, that's a good combination for a nurse. Sarah's mother Elena returned from her shift at the hospital just as Sarah was putting the finishing touches on her personal statement. Elena read over her daughter's shoulder, nodding with approval. This is good, Mija. Very good. You write about our family, but not to make people feel sorry for us. You write about strength. The next morning, Sarah arrived at work early to make copies of her application packet. She had stayed up until nearly 3 a.m, polishing every essay and organizing every document. If Marcus was going to judge her worthiness based on paperwork, she wanted it to be perfect. When the Seals arrived for lunch, Sarah approached their table with a manila envelope tucked under her arm. She placed their usual drink orders first, then turned to Marcus. Lieutenant Commander, here's everything you requested, she said formally, handing him the envelope. Marcus accepted it without comment, but Jake couldn't resist weighing in. Wow, this is really happening. Our little waitress has military aspirations now? It's nursing school, Sarah corrected quietly. Same difference. Bunch of people who couldn't hack real careers. The comment stung, but Sarah had learned to expect such remarks from Jake. What surprised her was Tommy's response. Dude, that's actually pretty cool. My mom was a nurse before she had kids. It's tough work. Jake looked genuinely shocked that anyone was taking Sarah's ambitions seriously. Are you kidding me? We're supposed to be impressed that she wants to empty bedpans for a living? It's more than that, Sarah said, her voice stronger than usual. Nurses save lives. They advocate for patients. They provide comfort and dignity in people's most vulnerable moments. It's an honor to do that work." The passion in her voice surprised everyone at the table, including herself. She had spent so long being invisible that speaking up felt foreign and terrifying. Marcus looked up from the envelope, studying her with new interest. "I'll review this tonight and let you know my decision tomorrow." "Thank you, sir." As Sarah walked away from their table, she heard Jake muttering to the others about delusions of grandeur and knowing your place. But she also heard Tommy defending her choice, and Marcus telling Jake to focus on his own career instead of criticizing others. The rest of the day passed in a blur of nervous energy. Sarah found herself making small mistakes, bringing the wrong order to table 6, forgetting to refill coffee at table 3. Her mind kept drifting to that manila envelope and what Marcus might think of her application. That evening, Sarah couldn't concentrate on anything. She helped David with his homework, assisted her mother with dinner preparation, and spent time with her father, but part of her mind was constantly wondering what Marcus was thinking as he reviewed her materials. Around 10 o'clock, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, "Application reviewed. We need to talk tomorrow. Come in an hour early." LTCDR Washington. Sarah stared at the message, trying to read meaning into the brief words. "We need to talk" could mean anything: approval, rejection, or something in between. The fact that he wanted to meet privately suggested it wasn't a simple yes or no answer. She barely slept that night, running through every possible scenario. Maybe her grades weren't high enough. Maybe her essay was too emotional. Maybe Marcus had decided she wasn't worth the risk to his reputation. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the diner 90 minutes before opening, her heart pounding as she unlocked the front door. The morning prep routine helped calm her nerves somewhat, but when Marcus arrived exactly 1 hour early as promised, her anxiety spiked again. He looked serious as he entered, still wearing his dress uniform from some early morning obligation. In his hand was her manila envelope, and Sarah couldn't tell from his expression whether the news was good or bad. "Thank you for coming in early," Sarah said, wiping down a table nervously. "Sit down, Sarah. We need to discuss your application." Sarah sat across from him in a booth, her hands folded tightly in her lap to keep them from shaking. Marcus opened the envelope and pulled out her materials, spreading them on the table between them. When he looked up at her, his expression was unreadable. "I'm going to be completely honest with you," he began. "Your academic record is impressive. Your essays show maturity and genuine commitment to nursing. Your work history demonstrates reliability and perseverance." Sarah's heart began to lift, but Marcus held up a hand. "However, writing this letter puts my reputation on the line. If I recommend you and you fail or drop out, that reflects poorly on my judgment. More importantly, this scholarship could go to someone else who might need it just as much." "I understand, sir." "Do you?" "Because I'm not just evaluating your paperwork. I'm evaluating your character, and I need to know you have what it takes to succeed under pressure." Marcus leaned forward, his voice becoming more intense. "Nursing school is brutal. The coursework is demanding, the clinical rotations are exhausting, and the emotional toll is enormous. You'll be dealing with life and death situations where your decisions matter. Are you prepared for that level of responsibility?" Sarah met his gaze directly. "Yes, sir. I am." "How do you know?" The question forced Sarah to dig deep, to articulate something she had felt but never fully expressed. "Because I've been preparing for it my whole life," she said slowly. "Every time I've had to stay calm when my father was having a bad day, every time I've had to be strong for my family when we couldn't afford groceries, every time someone like Jake has tried to make me feel small, all of that has been preparing me for the moment when a patient needs me to be stronger than I think I can be." Marcus studied her face, looking for any sign of doubt or uncertainty. Sarah forced herself to maintain eye contact, drawing on every ounce of confidence she possessed. Finally, Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded letter. He placed it on the table between them. "I'm going to write that recommendation," he said. "But I have conditions." Sarah's relief at Marcus's decision was immediately tempered by his mention of conditions. She waited, hardly breathing, as he organized his thoughts. First, Marcus began, if you get this scholarship, you don't disappear from here immediately. I want to see how you handle the transition period, how you manage your responsibilities here while preparing for school. That tells me a lot about your character. Of course, Sarah nodded. I would never leave my boss without proper notice. Second, I want monthly updates on your progress once you start the program. Not because I don't trust you, but because I believe in accountability. If you're struggling, I want to know so I can help if needed. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. The idea that someone would care enough to check on her progress was overwhelming. And, third, Marcus's voice became more serious, you need to understand that this letter isn't just about you. If you succeed, it opens doors for other people in similar situations. If you fail, it might close them. That's not meant to add pressure, but to help you understand the broader impact of this opportunity. I understand, Sarah said quietly. I won't let you down. Marcus smiled for the first time since she'd known him. I believe that. Now, there's something else we need to discuss. He glanced toward the front window, where his teammates would soon arrive for their usual lunch. Jake's behavior toward you is unacceptable. It reflects poorly on our team and on the military in general. I've addressed it with him privately, but I want you to know that you have my support if it continues. Sarah was stunned. She had accepted the casual cruelty as part of her job, never imagining that someone in authority might intervene on her behalf. Thank you, but I don't want to cause problems for anyone. Sarah, treating people with basic respect isn't a favor, it's the minimum standard. Jake seems to have forgotten that. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Miguel, who began his opening preparations in the kitchen. Marcus stood, straightening his uniform. I'll have the letter ready by Thursday morning. In the meantime, keep doing what you're doing here. Your work ethic is part of what convinced me you're ready for this opportunity. After Marcus left, Sarah sat in the empty diner, processing everything that had just happened. 3 days ago, nursing school felt like an impossible dream. Now, she had a real chance, thanks to the kindness of someone who had taken the time to see her as more than just the waitress. The lunch rush that day felt different. Sarah moved through her routine with renewed purpose, each interaction a step closer to her goals rather than just another shift to survive. When the SEALs arrived, the dynamic had shifted in subtle but noticeable ways. Marcus took his usual seat, but his presence seemed to command more respect than usual. Jake was notably quieter, his comments limited to actual food orders rather than personal attacks. Tommy, who had defended her the previous day, made a point of saying please and thank you. How's school planning going? He asked when Sarah brought his coffee. Very well, thank you for asking, Sarah replied, surprised by the genuine interest in his voice. Jake looked up sharply. School planning? Sarah's applying for nursing school, Tommy explained. It's pretty impressive actually. Nursing school? Jake's tone was skeptical but less openly hostile than usual. That's ambitious. Sarah couldn't tell if he meant it as a compliment or an insult, but Marcus's warning glance suggested Jake was choosing his words more carefully than usual. The rest of their meal passed without incident, and, when they left, Sarah found a larger tip than usual on the table. More importantly, there was no mess to clean up and no cruel comments to recover from. Over the next 2 days, Sarah threw herself into preparing for the possibility of acceptance. She researched the nursing program's requirements, visited the campus bookstore to price textbooks, and began planning how she would balance school with her work schedule. Her family's excitement was palpable. Her father spent hours discussing the science classes she would take, drawing on his own brief medical training from the Army. Her mother shared stories from her work at the hospital, giving Sarah insights into the daily realities of healthcare. Even David seemed proud, telling his friends that his sister was going to be a nurse. Thursday morning arrived with unusual weather, a rare rainstorm that turned the normally sunny San Diego morning gray and dramatic. Sarah arrived at work early, nervous energy making it impossible to sleep any longer. Marcus appeared at exactly 9 o'clock, wearing a rain-damp uniform and carrying a sealed envelope. Sarah's heart hammered as he approached the counter where she was organizing menus. Here's your letter, he said simply, handing her the envelope. I've also included my contact information for any follow-up the committee might need. Sarah took the envelope with trembling hands. I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by succeeding, Marcus replied. And, remember what I said about updates. I meant it. I will. I promise. Marcus turned to leave, then paused. Sarah? For what it's worth, I think you're going to make an excellent nurse. Your patients will be lucky to have you. The words meant more to Sarah than any tip or compliment she had ever received. Coming from someone who barely knew her but had taken the time to truly see her potential, it felt like validation of everything she had worked toward. That afternoon, Sarah submitted her complete application package, including Marcus's letter of recommendation. The scholarship committee had a 2-week review period, which meant she would know her fate by the end of the month. The waiting period tested Sarah's patience and nerves. She continued working at the diner, but every quiet moment was filled with anxiety and hope in equal measure. Her family tried to provide support while managing their own anticipation, creating an atmosphere of careful optimism in their small apartment. The Seals continued their regular lunch visits, but the atmosphere at their table had evolved. Jake's comments, while still sometimes sharp, lacked their previous cruelty. Tommy had begun treating Sarah more like a person than a service provider, asking about her day and actually listening to her responses. It was Marcus, however, who provided the most significant change. He treated Sarah with consistent respect and encouragement, often inquiring about her application status and sharing stories about his sister's nursing career. His teammates gradually followed his lead, creating a more positive dynamic that made Sarah's work environment measurably more pleasant. 2 weeks after submitting her application, Sarah was wiping down tables during the slow afternoon period when her phone rang. The caller ID showed the UC San Diego Veterans Affairs Office, and Sarah's heart nearly stopped. Sarah Martinez? Yes, this is Sarah. This is Linda Chen. I have news about your scholarship application. Sarah gripped the phone tighter, afraid to hope for good news after so many disappointments. Sarah, I'm pleased to inform you that you've been selected for the Veterans Family Education.